Hi, good evening everyone.
I am Angeline Solares, and today I will tackle about the theory of Gestalt Psychology.
The whole is different from the sum of its part. This means that if you say something is more than the sum of its part or greater than the sum of its part, you mean that it is better than you would expect from the individual parts because the way they combine adds a different quality. So this quote is about how much better things are together than as pieces. So this quote reminds us that what one can do, many can do better, at least in most cases. Put the opposite way, if you take something that works and remove some part, it is not as useful as it was. But putting that part back in, the thing is whole again, and much more useful than the pile of parts it was before. Pronounced Gestalt is a German word that roughly means shape, form, essence, or whole. Gestalt is a psychology term which means unified whole. It refers to theories of visual perception developed by German psychologists in the 1920s.
It was developed about 1910 by Max Wertheimer and carried on by Wolfgang Kohler and Kurt Kufka at Frankfurt University. Max Wertheimer. He was born on April 15, 1880 and died on October 12, 1943. He was born in Prague, Czech Republic. He is a psychologist and the father of Gestalt Psychology. Wolfgang Kohler. He was born in January 21, 1887 and died in June 11, 1967. He was born in Reval, now Tallinn at Estonia. He is a psychologist, phenomenologist, another of the founder of Gestalt Psychology. Kurt Kufka. He was born on March 18, 1886 and died on November 22, 1941. He was born in Berlin, Germany. He is a psychologist and another of the founder of Gestalt Psychology in the learning theorist. Max Wertheimer, Wolfgang Kohler, and Kurt Kufka concluded that learners were not passive but rather active. This is the perceptual process. Certain factors impact on this perceptual process. Factors like past experiences, needs, attitudes, and one's present situation can affect his perception. We come now to the Gestalt Principles. We have 6 principles, which are law of proximity, law of similarity, law of closure, law of good continuation, law of good pregnancy, and law of figure and ground. Law of proximity. The law of proximity states that when objects appear close to one another, they tend to be perceived as a group. Law of similarity. The law of similarity captures the idea that when we look at the objects that are similar to each other, we tend to group them together. We are prone to notice matching shapes, colors, and forms, as opposed to looking for what isn't similar. Our brains quickly identify patterns faster than the separate parts of the pattern. Law of closure. The law of closure captures the idea that when we see incomplete elements in a visual, our brains tend to fill in the gaps and see it as a whole. Law of continuity. The mind continues visual patterns. The eye continues in the direction it is going. The principle of continuity predicts the preference for continuous figures. Law of pregnance. The word pregnance is a German term meaning good figure. The law of pregnance is sometimes referred to as the law of good figure or the law of simplicity. This law holds that objects in the environment are seen in a way that makes them appear as simple as possible. Law of figure and ground. Figure-ground organization is a type of perceptual grouping which is a vital necessity for recognizing objects through vision. Wolfgang Kohler was the first psychologist who developed the insight learning, in which he described an experiment with apes that could use boxes and sticks as tools to solve the problem. In his experiment, Scholar hung a piece of fruit just out of the reach of each chimp. He went provide the chimps with either 2 sticks or 3 boxes, then waited and watched. Scholar noticed that after the chimp realized they couldn't simply reach or jump up to retrieve the fruit, they stopped, had a seat, and thought about how they might solve the problem. Then after a few moments, the chimp stood up and proceeded to solve the problem. In the first scenario, the problem was solved by placing the smaller stick into the longer stick to create one very long stick which could be used to knock the hanging fruit down. In the second scenario, the chimps would solve the problem by stacking the boxes on top of each other, which allowed them to climb to the top of the stack of boxes and reach the fruit. The important aspect of learning was not reinforcement, but the coordination of thinking to create new organizations. Kohler referred to this behavior as insight or discovery learning. Insight learning is the abrupt realization of a problem solution. Insight learning is not the result of trial and error, responding to an environmental stimulus, or the result of observing someone else attempt the problem. It is a completely cognitive experience which requires the ability to visualize the problem and the solution internally, in the mind's eye so to speak, before initialing a behavioral response. Implications of Gestalt Principle to teaching and learning. Law of proximity. Related concept or lesson should be taught aligned or closely to each other. This is the reason why subtraction is taught after addition, multiplication after subtraction, then division after multiplication. Imagine teaching addition, then jumping directly to polygons. Law of similarity. Similar lessons or contents should be grouped together to make learners develop understanding more efficiently and effectively. This is the reason why lessons are grouped into units. Unit 1 is for human body, Unit 2 is for energy and motion, and so on and so forth. Law of closure. When a concept or topic is incomplete, thus isn't closed. Incomplete information may make learners want to discover what's missing rather than concentrating on the given instruction. If a student finds a math algorithm confusing because a certain question is left unanswered or a step isn't clear, they will tend to concentrate on what confused part of the process rather than the total process as a whole. This is why students get lost. Thus, make the lesson complete. Present it clearly, simply, and always be ready for students' clarification. Law of good continuation. Lessons should be presented in such a way that learners will see this as connected and continuous. Now you know why we have the review part of the lesson plan. This way, students will realize that their new lessons actually has continuity and is related to what they already know or to the previous lesson. Law of prognance. Prognance states that when things are grasped as whole, the minimal amount of energy is exerted in thinking. In short, make your lessons holistic, complete, and most of all simple. Law of figure and ground. For a figure to be perceived, it must stand out from the background. Emphasis should be done in important aspect of the lesson. For example, teachers should vary the tone of their voice or write boldly or underline the important keywords of the lesson. And here the discussions end. Thank you for listening.